In the last video with the Honda Fit, we upgraded the clutch, shifter, and motor mount in preparation for it making a huge amount of horsepower with a turbocharger. In this video, we're finally installing said turbocharger. But in addition to installing the turbo on the Fit, we're also going to start custom fabricating the turbo kit. That means mounting the Mishimoto intercooler, building intercooler piping, building an intake, building a custom exhaust, and a few other things like a wastegate mount. But before we can do any of that, we gotta get the old stuff out. So let's get the Fit up in the air, start unbolting the exhaust, the bumper, the intake, and get this thing ready for a turbo. About to get the exhaust manifold off. Already got the bumper, the axle out. So once this is out, we're kind of ready to start test fitting things. Don't you hate it when a bolt just feels like it's infinitely long? It's in a really bad position. Oh, nice. Look. So cute. Oh, look at the little exhaust ports. I can barely fit my thumb in this thing. First thing I want to check, is this turbo manifold the right layout? Because I bought it for a second gen Fit. Technically this is for a second generation Honda Fit, so it might not be correct, but it is. As you can see, lines up nicely. The first gen and second gen Fits have the same engine, so there's no reason that should be different. Now, does it fit in the car? Well, not only does it fit, it fits perfectly. It's got a good amount of room between the firewall, hopefully enough for a little turbo. Doesn't hit any of the accessories. All right, speaking of turbo. Boom. I have turbocharged my Fit, guys. All done. So that is awesome news. The turbo fits easily. There's enough room where I can assemble the turbo on the manifold off the car, which is gonna make it easier to put together. Next, I wanna test fit the intercooler. Because let's be honest, on a turbo car, that's kind of the coolest part. And with a little modification, that's gonna fit real nice. It's funny how big it feels off the car, and then when it's on the car, looks tiny. 450 horsepower, it'll be plenty big. So far, everything that could have gone wrong has gone perfectly right. I think the next step is to go ahead and start actually installing the turbo, which means we have to clock it and then put new gaskets in it, put all the new fittings in it, attach it to the manifold, and then install the manifold on the car. So I guess I'm just going to work on the turbo for now. The wastegate on, the downpipe adapter on, all the fittings on, then we can continue. Starts closing right at like 7 pounds. Perfect. I bought this off Amazon for, it was like 30 bucks, so it wasn't cheap. And this way, it's just not, does not fit. Plus, the V-band on it is just utter junk. So I'm gonna cut the V-band off, weld my own on it, and then make it fit. Much better. Now it actually fits. Wait, yeah. Took me 2 seconds of grinding to do that. And now we have a functioning V-band that actually interlocks and seals nicely. So that took me, 10 minutes. I don't know why the company could have done that, but you know what? Now we can actually put the gasket on there and bolt that on for good. I don't know if this is technically right, but I always red RTV on my gaskets. The turbo on my Miata is literally only sealed with red RTV and it's still good. So, you know, I kind of figured it can't hurt, right? Especially with all these old parts that aren't perfectly smooth. All right, the turbo is in and it looks freaking fantastic. Next thing we're gonna work on is the oil for the turbo. Obviously, you gotta get oil into the turbo and oil out of the turbo. The oil feed, relatively simple. What we're gonna do is we're gonna tap into the oil pressure switch, just using some T-fittings, and we have some more adapters, a feed line, that's it. So the turbo drain, you have to get oil from the turbo into the engine. And the easiest way to do that is to add a fitting on the oil pan. Now what most people do, people who don't have access to a welder or don't know how to weld, you can drill and tap the oil pan. You can even do it with the oil pan still in the car and put in a bung to make an oil drain line like that. I did that on my turbo Miata and it worked fine for years. But since we do have access to a welder and since I do know how to weld, we're going to pull the oil pan off, drill a hole, and weld a bung onto the oil pan. Well, we got the oil pan off successfully without damaging anything. Engine looks good. You know, there was no metal chunks or anything inside the oil pan, so that's always nice. Anyway, now we take the oil pan, we clean it. So now I want to mark where I'm going to drill the hole for the bung. Normally you kind of just find a place that's in line with the turbo and put it as high as you can. The problem is that the axle goes right past the top of the oil pan. So if we put it too high, it's gonna be hard to access. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put the dipstick in. That way, I get an idea of where the oil level will sit. And then I can place the bung just above that. That way the oil will still drain properly, but it's not so high where it's gonna be difficult to work with. And actually, the oil level sits quite low, so that's perfect. So I'm gonna put it right here in between these two marks, I think. I'm also just going to measure where this is. So it's like 8.5 inch from the back, 2.5 down, just to make sure it's not gonna interfere with anything. Okay, cool. So with the bung welded on, I went ahead and cleaned off the surface, replaced the two seals. I also cleaned off the surface of the engine block. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put some gasket maker on here and reinstall the pan. So the turbo's in, I went ahead and put the axle back in so we kind of know where that is. I got myself a Dash 8 AN line with one fitting on. Can go ahead and connect that to the turb ski here. I've got my other fitting right here. Instead of a 90-degree hose end, I did a straight hose end with a 90-degree adapter, which is actually a tighter radius than a 90-degree hose end. Perfect clearance, not even really sketchy. So now it's marked. I'm gonna take it off. Then I'm gonna cut it to length. And I'm going to assemble the other side of the hose. There we go. We have an oil drain. I'm not, it's not perfect. I wish I could clock the turbo a little bit more, and a 45-degree fitting probably would have worked better than a straight, but it does work and it isn't kinked, so I think we're all good. The reason I couldn't clock the turbo anymore is because I couldn't get it undone. It was really, really rusty, and I let it soak in PB Blaster for literally 2 days. Still couldn't get it, but I don't think it's gonna be a big deal. Oil drain is still the bottom-most fitting. Now I'm gonna work on the turbo feed, the oil feed. Now I want to mount the intercooler. And as you saw, it pretty much fits right here. Yeah, like that. But I'm gonna very lightly notch the back of the crash support, as well as notch this bottom thin piece. And then we can kind of get it right where we want it to. So now the intercooler is fully on, the bracket's painted. It is a very sturdy mount, so that's good. Huge shout out to Mishimoto for this intercooler yet again. We are waiting on some piping to do the, the hot side of the intercooler, but we can go ahead and get started with the cold side. So this right here is gonna go around through this gap right there, up here, and into the throttle body. Nice and simple. So we have this piece going around the radiator. I added a little S down there to avoid the radiator fan. Now, just gotta bring it up to here. Already cut myself a little 90-degree, which, as you can kind of tell, lines up nicely. And we should have a little bit more. Question is, will I be able to make this all one piece? Personally, I like trying to make each side one piece. There's less couplers, less chance of a boost leak. I think it looks cleaner, more reliable, but it does make installation a little bit more difficult, because obviously you got a bigger thing, you gotta worm your way around. So I'm gonna try to make one piece, but we'll see what happens. So this intercooler pipe is all welded up. It ain't perfect, but turned out pretty good. I didn't have a bead roller for the ends, so I did go ahead and just put a little bead on there to hopefully prevent the coupler from popping off under boost. I think we're only gonna make like 7 pounds of boost or something really low, so I'm not worried about that. But let's put it in, eh? Actually not gonna do that yet because it's gonna get in the way of making the intake. Let's make the intake. I'm waiting on one coupler to start the actual intake, so while I wait, I'm gonna mount this Mishimoto baffled catch can. Now, since we are turbocharging a naturally aspirated engine, a catch can is a good idea. Since this engine was not designed to ever see positive pressure, when you put positive pressure into it, it's gonna be pushing more oil out the breather and into the intake. And so that's where the catch can comes in. It catches that oil and cleans the air going into the engine. One line goes to the valve cover, the other line goes to the intake. So pretty much the intake is sucking the air out of the crankcase. That air's got oil in it, the catch can cleans it, and then it goes into the intake. So the catch can is mounted and ran into the valve cover port, and there's an intake here. I went ahead and made it off camera because it was just, everything's so deep in there for the intake, I couldn't really show you much. But let me show you now. We got the turbo, 45 degree, and then a straight that goes up there. That aluminum piece goes into this adapter, which steps it up to a 3-inch, which then curves into the filter. There is one seam I have to weld on the 2.5-inch section of the intake. Plus, I have to add this somewhere, you know, right here to have it go into the catch can. So with the cold side and the intake done, we can now work on the hot side intercooler piping. Turbo to right there. I got both my couplers in from Mishimoto. In case you didn't know already, all the fabrication materials, couplers, etc. I got from Mishimoto. They make some awesome, really high quality stuff, and it's all a pretty fair price. So if you guys want fabrication equipment or parts, I mean, they got lots of parts, check them out in the description down below. But let's get cutting. The turbo's on, the intercooler intake, all that is fabricated and installed. The next step is to fabricate a custom exhaust, but that's going to be in the next video. However, I know you guys probably want to hear this thing, and I want to hear this thing. So I fabricated the downpipe, which is what we need to get this to hopefully run. It's got the stock tune, but technically it should run with the stock stuff. Obviously you'll see the downpipe being made in the next video, but we should be able to start it. That's the point. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna crank it until we get oil pressure in the oil line, make sure that's all good. Then I'll put it all back together and hopefully hear it run. Hey, we got oil. Oil line is attached. All the coil packs are plugged back in. Let's see if this thing wants to run. Hey, yo. Let's go. Doesn't even have a check engine light right now. That's awesome. Obviously, the full exhaust is gonna sound a little different. Well, that's it. The Fit is officially turbocharged. Now, it's not quite ready for a tune. Make an exhaust in the next video. Then we gotta put the injectors in and put the tune in, and also put the wideband sensor in. The exhaust that I'm gonna be building is gonna be super awesome. It's gonna be valved, great for a daily driver, but loud and race car what I want it to be. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you for all the support. If you do wanna watch the exhaust video ahead of schedule and support the channel, please check out Patreon. But other than that, I'll see you guys in a bit. Thanks for watching.